All right. So now it's official. I think we'll just let this roll and just go from there. Welcome to the first pilot of the Experience Project. I'm so excited to do
Thank you.
this.
I'm excited too.
This is going to
Yay!
be fantastic. Why don't we start with introductions? So, um, welcome. Obviously, you are Lorianne Pope. You're my friend, your colleague, um, the quintessential voice of God, which we'll get into here in a minute. But I wanted
Mhm.
you to introduce yourself and share with whomever will listen to this who you are and where you come from.
Sure. Well, we're going back because we met in 2015. I was looking, May of 2015 is when I started at then Facebook, and you and Aaron were two of the first people I met. And you were my onboarding buddy and, helped me get set up and around. So, how time flies. But over the last 20 years now, I have been working in events and experiential conferences, activations. The bulk of my experience is actually in programming and doing the session content, keynotes, all that stuff. But it was when actually I was in Miami at the Association for Anti-Money Laundering Specialists. We'll talk about that that I started doing what I call the left brain, right brain of events of doing programming, but then also having the logistics and ops team under me. So I really developed an appreciation for both. And of course, at Meta, it was really around the production.
One of the first things that I had wanted to do is sort of establish credibility. Why we perhaps have a leg to stand on to chat about experiences, and experiences is definitely the topic of this entire project. Trying to figure out the answer, or most likely many answers to what makes an experience. Um, so, in terms of establishing credibility, what sort of roles within events or programming or building experiences have you had? And maybe share that in layman's terms, in case there's anyone outside of the event world that is curious what you have done and worked on.
I'm going to go back to high school and actually not my professional career. Because I was thinking around where I got the love of events and bringing people together. And I think it was high school in Denver, at Denver East High School. I was always a student council person, right, representing in some way. And the student council was responsible for organizing dances or pep rallies, assemblies, or even like the bake sale, that happened in like the main foyer of the school. And so thinking about bringing people together, if it's around a dance or music or whatever it was, I started really behind the scenes loving to facilitate that. So, I was thinking about a dance we did. It was called Morp, which is prom backwards. And it was basically a reverse of prom. So it was for underclassmen, or underclass, the underclass students, I should say. And then it was also a reversal where girls asked the guys. Um, but right, how do you bring students together, especially a shy sophomore who hasn't been to a dance before? And then all of a sudden, an hour later, that person's like in the middle of the dance floor having a great time with friends. So that's, I think, where the bug started. But it was in content. I was working in book and magazine publishing. And at Business Week, which is now defunct, they had marketing events and it was really for advertisers. And then it was print advertising. So it was a way to engage big advertisers. And we had high profile speakers, political figures, to bring them together, including, golf tournaments, and things like that. And then I went on to the Direct Marketing Association where we did huge conferences and expos. The annual show had 15,000 attendees with 150 concurrent sessions, 4 big keynotes, and 300 exhibitors on the exhibitor floor. So just a monster conference, but probably one of the best experiences I had in a team where you were in the trenches putting that together. And then I worked at a smaller association in Miami, the Association for Anti-Money Laundering Specialists. And that was really around government and bank officials and creating content around bank compliance. Sounds kind of dry, but it was actually really interesting. Money laundering's fascinating. And that's where I got to do global conferences. So gained an appreciation for the nuances in different regions. And in that role, I circled the globe 4 times. I had every region except Latin America. And then from there, I actually came to Facebook. And that's where our manager, who also was my VP at the Direct Marketing Association, so she brought me in to Facebook to evaluate their small business program and how Facebook was talking to small businesses. And one, getting them to engage in the digital economy, but then two, using Facebook's suite of business tools. And that was just a game changer, where it married both event and experiential with, I think, community presence and purpose. And so it was fulfilling in ways that I'm still trying to wrap my mind around.
That's awesome. Thank you. I always love hearing how everyone got into events because the stories are super broad, but it always starts with some sort of interest early on. And this may end
Yeah.
up being a thread that we may end up finding as we explore experiences more broadly. But I had a similar experience when I was in, I believe, the Boy Scouts, organizing events, organizing
Oh.
troop functions that I found that I loved pulling people together. And there was always a positive outcome in pulling people together,
Hmm.
whether it was going on a backpack trip or trying to win a uh, camping cooking competition, which is something I'm still super proud of. Um,
That's where the barbecue festivals came in.
that's
I
right.
see.
That is right. But it's funny being able to see where those origins are and how that ends up manifesting itself over the long run.
Yeah.
Um, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing. That is obviously you are a credible person to chat about experiences. You've had wonderful experience over a long period of time in building experiences. So let's set some context. We're here to chat about experiences, and I think this whole idea started with my ruminating over the request that we elevate our events to experiences. How do we create a
Mhm.
brand experience? How do we create a moment into an experience? And in being tasked with these sorts of things, we often ask, well, what is an experience? And the answer always varies. I was wondering if you might be able to share your own experience in being tasked with this elevation of a moment to an experience, um, and where you have been able to do this with any of your programs.
Okay, so one of the questions you asked in the email you sent to me is, what is a transaction versus an experience? And I was thinking about that. And so, I'll go back to that morp dance at East High School in Denver. The transaction is, right, the student buying the ticket to the dance. The experience is seeing that sophomore in the middle of the floor dancing, right? Something you take away, one that you had, but then you talk about with other students, or other students talk about the music that was played. Or I used to say, that's my jam. And that would like get me on the floor when the DJ had that music. And so I think that that translates to everything, right? You have the transaction, which also has to be, a great, I was going to say experience. It has to be an easy process. So, in the case with, say, brand and corporate events, that transaction is them registering for the event. It's clicking on an Instagram post to learn more about it because they're intrigued. And so I think that's the transactional part of it. And the experience is, once you get all the people together in whatever it is you're going to do to experience your brand, or come around a program or a wedding or whatever it is, um, that's what you build to make everybody feel included, to have that right center of the dance floor moment. But it was really called the 4 Ps of experiences. And so it's people, presence, people, place, presence, performance, right? And so an experience is thinking about the people. And for me, it's behind the stage, on the stage, and in the audience. You can't have a success if any of those things are off, right? The team that comes together to build it, how they work together, how they execute. the people on the stage, do you have speakers and panelists that reflect the people who are in the audience in that town, in that community, whatever it is? And then, of course, the people in the audience, right? Do they make up your customers and clients in a way that they all feel welcomed? And then place, I think, speaks to not only the venue, but right, does the place work for those people? So, for instance, with Facebook, we did Facebook Community Boost, which was a road show, actually globally, but across the US to engage small businesses. And with each stop, we wanted to make it seem hyper local so that the snacks and food we had were representative of that city. The speakers, the small businesses, everything spoke to that city so that the people there felt welcome and felt like something they could relate to. And then the presence, right? How are we showing up? Part of it was we were doing content and education to give these small business owners the skills to start to advertise on Facebook and Instagram. But we also had an activation floor with an Instagram creative studio. And at the time, it was Oculus. Was that what we had? Before
Yeah.
Quest? Yeah. We had, like, Oculus demonstrations, um, and then, of course, messaging, WhatsApp came into it. So those gave them a chance to really have a hands-on and interact and play with our products in a way and interact, with the Facebook team. And then there's the performance, right? Did you get or did you achieve the goals or get out of this experience what you hoped to? And sometimes it's numbers, it's revenue, it could be brand sentiment, whatever it is, that's the outcome. And I have to tell you, I was thinking about it. That framework pretty much works for everything, right? It
When
does.
when you think of the 4 Ps, what do you think from an anatomy perspective, what goes into each individual P to make it resonate? Like, how do you create
Um,
each one to ensure that each one on its own is
yeah,
able to show up to the best of its ability, and then the combination of the
yeah.
4 is what makes the experience?
Yeah, so this is one of the things, since I left Meta, I've been doing some consulting and just doing one-offs with different brands around consulting or just helping them set up a strategy. And, people want to dive into the 4 Ps before they even understand strategically or have a vision for what this event is. And so it's interesting to me that they want to jump into that, but they can't articulate, right? Here's our strategy, here's the vision, here are the goals and objectives that we want. And so until you've established those, it's really you can move on, but I think it's not as informed as it could be. And so that's where you kind of have to know what this event is supposed to be. It's not just bringing people together and hoping for the best and getting some cool swag and, oh, wasn't that great? It needs to be more intentional than that because then that informs every P, right? And so let's take, for instance, your role now. You deal more with the sales team. And so the people, if it's around, we want certain clients in this vertical or who's have this amount of spend, that's stuff you really need to think about so that the people have something in common. And I think those people you start to inform then, right? Who's on the stage, behind the stage, you've got your team, but that's people, presence, right? What messaging like do we want to land? It's mind blowing to me how you can talk to, and I mean some pretty big sophisticated brands who want to do an experience. And when you say, so what's the messaging? What are you all talking about? Crickets, right? And we all know that's usually the thing that comes last, and for whatever reason, they can't get the deck together, they keep changing. But if you don't know what your messaging is, seriously, how can you move forward with anything? It's always a surprise to me. Um, and then, wait, I did people, I did presence. Again, place, like, right? Where are the people? Are the people traveling in and you're creating a cool experience where they wouldn't normally get to be in this place. But again, that should go to a goal on what it is you want these people to do and feel. And then performance. If you don't have goals and objectives for what you wanted, I don't know why we're doing this. I
There's
can do
no
it.
way
And a
to
lot
get
of people
anything out
do.
of it.
Yeah, a lot of people do. And it's so funny. I didn't plan this wedding, but I had a friend where I was like, well, what's your goal for the wedding? And I thought she was going to say something like, I wanted to reflect, both my fiance and I, and, sort of, having things that are meaningful to both of us. And she's like, I want the best gifts possible. And I was like, well, okay. So,
It's like a
right. If that's
birthday.
your goal, that's a goal, right? And if that's what you're trying to do, then let's figure out how these people can have an experience and want to send you the most expensive gift on your registry.
That's awesome. It is funny chatting with people for what seems like the first time in their planning of events. It is almost a light bulb, eye opening moment when they realize the volume of strategy that goes into an event.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's obviously the messaging. It's how we structure
Yeah.
the program. But when you start thinking about, is the audience in the room the right people that you are trying to land this message that we're now trying to figure out? What are the possible
Yeah.
outcomes? People start to realize that events as a channel can be very powerful when you start thinking about all the P's.
Yeah. And
It's
that's, you know
fascinating.
what? That's a really good point. A lot of people don't see events as part of their marketing channel. They see them as standalone. And I think that's what we have to do a better job of, with event marketing and experiential marketing is helping people understand like this is but one channel of your marketing mix. Yes, it's usually the biggest channel and where you invest the most, but it should not be a standalone instance from the other things you're trying to do with your marketing.
And one not to be underestimated. It is quite often the only in person channel that people have. You may have sales meetings and there's small meetings, but when you are trying to create the human element of your brand and bring people together for a reason, events are tremendously powerful. And if not treated carefully, can do a tremendous amount of damage to a brand or trust,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. We talk about some of the more difficult parts of pulling events together. What do you think is some of the friction to creating an experience? And is there such a thing as positive friction in trying to develop an experience?
For the most part, I think the friction comes from cross-functional partners and teams, and when you have multiple stakeholders who have conflicting goals and objectives for what they want. And oftentimes, right, we're in the position of being the facilitator of all that. And how do you, one, make all of your stakeholders happy, but then also make sure all of the cross functional partners are marching in the same direction? And so the biggest thing I found is listening and people feeling like they're being heard. And so even if we don't um, meet everyone's top goal, they know that we listen. But usually there's also a way you can reframe it to say, this may not be the language you're speaking, but let me help map it out to let you know that every stakeholder, your goals are being met. So let's take Facebook community boosts with small businesses. At the time, Sheryl Sandberg was our COO. She was the public face of small business. Policy programs wanted to engage elite policymakers in their particular districts. And they often would find out if the policymaker was in or out at the last minute. That move too affected the production team because, of course, we work on dates, deadlines. If we don't have a venue, like, right, we're not going to be able to make this happen. So we can't wait 6 weeks out to see if the policymaker's in. And of course, marketing wants that adoption of the tools and services, and then, of course, increased revenue. And so, oh, and PR comms, of course, wants the stories so that again, they're putting the message out that Facebook or Meta is good for the world. And so you have to go back and really be a translator, I think, in that friction to help smooth it out, right? To say to the policy team, we are looking at venues in this policymaker's district, right? We're hoping they'll be able to attend, but one of the things we're going to be able to give you is you can actually go to the policymaker now and say, here is a turnkey event in your district. So rather than waiting on them, switching it around to say, we've got a turnkey event. All you have to do is show up and you can take credit for it. Marketing team, right? Through the education and training, that's where, we'll be able to, um, teach these small businesses around how to use our products, but then how about we also give them a $25 credit to an advertising coupon so that they can give it a try? PR comms, we're using local small businesses on panels. So, one, these small businesses are people who can talk to the press. We know that they've had success on the platform. So, that's where PR comms and policy, right? Get those positive stories coming out. And so, when you frame it in that way, then people are able to nod because what the event production team is doing is creating this amazing experience. And so a lot of people just see it as building assets, picking the swag, but we're building this so that it can hit all of those things for you. And P.S. And by the way, if it's an amazing experience, that's a win-win for everybody because a lot of people think, oh, this costs too much, or why does the build have to be this? Or, why do we have to have so many people from the team fly out? And, again, back to those people, if you make these small businesses happy, everything cascades from there.
I I do find it's interesting when we chat about friction and trying to get consensus across all the teams. At no point are all the different points of view ever wrong. It's similar to what we mentioned towards the top of the call when we're looking at what is a positive experience or asking someone what they think is a
Yeah.
positive experience and they share their point of view. And then someone can easily counter that immediately with their own point of view, neither of which are wrong. And as you're pulling
Right.
together any of these programs, the different points of view aren't necessarily wrong, but it's trying to figure out, to your point, how are we checking all the boxes that need to be checked for a
Yeah.
particular endeavor? Which
Yeah.
requires getting all of those inputs and finding that common story across all of them.
Yeah.
And that often means competing opinions, competing points of view, competing personalities. Huge
Yeah.
part of our
Yeah.
job is just managing personalities, but trying to
And I have
find.
to say, I think there is an event marketer personality where you like that friction, right? You like to be able to bring to chaos, like, right, bring some sort of sense to chaos. And yes, some days you're like, okay, I can't do another one of these anymore. And then you get right back to it.
It is funny. You'll go through one very difficult event or multiple different difficult events, and at the tail end of it, you come out of it saying, "Never again." And somehow
I
we're
go,
right back in the middle of
I'm
it
good.
again. There's
God.
there's something peaceful in the chaos that we enjoy actually
Yeah.
being in the middle of it. But the friction test is, I think, is interesting because at no point is an event or an experience easy to pull off, and seeing where the frictions are and what silver lining comes out of the friction, I think is an interesting
Hmm.
thing to pick apart. As we look to check all of those boxes, as we look at each of the four P's as you mentioned them, what do you think is the element that takes the event to an experience, a moment being a story worth telling? What is that transition, do you feel, that a moment becomes something more? What do you think that is?
That is a moment and an outcome that you can't predict. That's where the magic happens. I wish I could say I have a formula, I can tell you how to do it, but I don't know. We just get lucky. And I can share an example. So, Facebook Community Boost Roadshow in 2018, where we hit 30 US cities. And so, again, right, wanted to make it super local, relevant to those small businesses in that community. And so, there was an idea to have a hometown hero. And was basically a Facebooker who would come and basically do the opening to basically say, I'm from this community, here are small businesses that I love, et cetera, et cetera. And, depending on the speaker or how long ago it was they lived in that place, it could be kind of iffy. But in this case in Atlanta, and here's one where like it was just so unexpected, but it was magic. Willie Henry, who was a Facebooker, lived in Atlanta, and so we asked him to be the hometown hero. He has a personality unto himself, but there's something about Willie where people are just drawn to him. He's the cool dude, right? Everybody just kind of wants a little piece of that coolness and that swag. Um, but he basically said he wanted his walk on music to be Welcome to Atlanta by Ludacris. And so when he got up on the stage and that walk-in music started and he just kind of strutted on stage in kind of this slow way, the crowd like went crazy. And I was just like, what? Like, what's going on? We've done this before. Hometown Hero comes on, there's walk-on music, but he knew the exact right song to like, right, make that crowd say, we are here for us and this is our town. Then he went on to talk about the small businesses that he frequented, where he took his 2 boys to get haircuts, once a month. And so again, building that credibility and the crowd just ate it up. Or where, they like to get their favorite soul food meal. And he set it up in a way that gave us such credibility that we understand where we are, that it was really hard for me to go on after and give the little like, "Here's my speech." Right before transitioning to a panel, and then transitioning to the panel that I moderated, we had like a diverse group of businesses, but they were all so deeply entrenched in Atlanta that they talked about it in such an authentic way. I couldn't have asked for a better way for these businesses to say, "Oh, and then because, I advertise on Facebook, that's how I was able to grow my business in the Atlanta community." So we hadn't even gotten out of the main session yet, right? And attendees are like ready to go. Which session am I going to? Let me go out to the activities floor and like do a creative thing. Maybe it was Instagram stories at that point. I can't remember. But that energy got people invested in the day and it was a palpable buzz. Like you could just feel it. And that's one where we were all just like, wow, we couldn't have, like, seriously, there's no way we could have predicted that.
I think that palpable buzz is what I am most fascinated about this entire endeavor of looking into experiences, is that moment where you have changed what is a gathering of people for a business purpose into something that they're going to go home and talk about. And
Yeah.
I was at a work dinner last year where there was lots of different creators and different judges, but Spike Lee was there. He was one of the judges for this competition.
Hmm.
And the evening is going on wonderfully. And he gets up and gives a speech during dinner and shares the line, "The grace of happiness unexpected," which I think is one of the most spectacular lines I've ever heard because
Hmm.
it
I like that.
encapsulates what you're saying. The grace of happiness unexpected, where those unexpected moments are what triggers that different level, that change from a moment to a story, that change from an event to an experience. And trying to recreate that is damn near impossible. Like, you can't
Yeah.
create those moments because
You
they
can't.
are in the moment.
Yeah. And even the next day, I have to say, a lot of people had such a great time on day one. They brought other businesses to day two. And, day two wasn't as special because we couldn't have the same intro. Like, it kicked it off on day one. But people were basically like, I want you to experience this magic. I had such a great time at this event. And referencing Spike Lee, especially being, a content person, I do want to talk about speakers that you have in the room. I think sometimes there's a perception that, oh, they're just dropping money on big names. And so, take at the Direct Marketing Association, we had keynotes like Martha Stewart, Richard Branson, um, Ty Pennington, just marketing and business luminaries in the marketing and advertising world. And I would sort of say to people, this keynote is basically saying it's worth me being in this room, right? Because they turn down things all the time. But when they decide to speak at your event, that's a signal to attendees that this marketer, this speaker, this luminary finds it worthwhile to be in the room. And then hopefully that person also creates gives other people something to talk about. So, right, 15,000 people, how do you know with all those people moving around an event that they have something to talk about? Well, with Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson, my apologies. he, at the end of his talk, basically told all the women to come on stage and take a picture with him. So women started to bum rush the stage in droves. And think about the production, like when you build, like, right, a stage, it can only hold so much weight. But in the middle of that, this story is not ending with it crashing. But so on the one hand, that's a moment, but as you know, as event people were going, "Oh my gosh, please don't let it crash. Please don't let it crash," because you can't stop that momentum. Security couldn't stop the people from coming up. And that was all people talked about during that 5-day conference. Like, "Were you in the picture? Did you see?" Like, and, on the one hand, we were just like, reputationally, we were ruined. And it turned out to be this thing that everybody talked about.
I love that. That is so cool. I can distinctly remember those same kind of moments where you just have your hand in your mouth, just
Oh my
hoping that
god.
something goes through.
Right.
I think that's fantastic. So, sort of dovetailing off of that, I've called this the proximity test. The what is it about the people, human beings being together in those moments that changes the dynamic? Why is it that when people are actually together at that event, you get something more magical than you possibly ever could with a virtual program?
I think probably it's as old as the test of time that people coming together, human interaction is more powerful than any other thing. And so it's not just events. I think that's how, as humanity, we're built. So whether it's meeting your friend for coffee or having Sunday dinner with your family or, meeting colleagues or being curious and showing up at an event to learn something, um, like we're just hardwired for that connection. And so, right, it's our job to facilitate that. And so nothing beats in person. And I know during COVID, we had to pivot, or as I said, we were doing pirouettes because we were just spinning so quickly trying to figure that out. And yes, it was a bridge and a band aid and tided us over. But once people were able to come back to in person, I mean, they were there. And then, the virtual dropped off a little bit. Like, think, for a while we thought we could just keep the two going, and virtual dropped off a little bit. And that's because, you want that interaction. And I think also for brands, especially for tech brands, it's the way you come to life for your clients and customers and the community who uses your product and services. People are often wary, like even panelists, when we call and say, "Hey, we're Facebook, we're coming to town, we'd love to have you on a panel." And they thought it was some sort of scam or like, "Stop texting me." I'd have to like send a LinkedIn link to say, "See, I'm real." Or, we had to start putting our pictures and our signatures so they knew it was a real person, um, because they didn't believe there were people at Facebook. And that was the biggest thing, like, even at the help desk, people would come up just to say, "I didn't realize people worked at Facebook." And you're like, "Hmm, okay." But right? That's a big learning that people use your products all day long and they never make a connection that there are people behind that platform making it run and making things come together so that you can have this experience of connecting with your friends, and people. Yeah,
I do think that when people are actually together, you are more present and in the moment. Because otherwise, you got a million distractions. I've got all sorts of things that are flashing and moving around on my screen, and you're constantly distracted. But when you are
absolutely.
actually there
Yeah.
in the room with one or hundreds or thousands of other people, you're so much more in the moment and it actually resonates more.
Yeah, it's true, right? There's nothing like it. Or having those spontaneous meetups with like, "Hey, I didn't know you'd be here. Like, let's grab a coffee later, in the expo hall or right in the cafe." Or I don't know if you're at Cannes, how you guys had the lounge. Um, but yeah, it's the, you know what? It's the joy of the unexpected. I think that's what is the thrill of people coming together in person.
I agree. So the final question for today's conversation is the so what is what can people take away from this? What can we share as a learning um, for anyone that may end up listening to this?
Wow, okay, so that one I thought about, and I actually am still not quite sure how to answer it. For me, the "so what" continues to be the, "Oh my gosh, you had to be at this event," or oh my gosh, you had to be at Aunt so and so's house on Sunday because of this. The so what to me is the continued conversation around what that experience, that connection being there did for you and why you still want to talk about it and let other people know why it was so great or so bad. Like, right? We tend to vocalize what's really great and what's not great. And so that's my so what. You will not believe, or did you see, or right? That's the so what that I think makes it worthwhile.
Do you think, based off of what we've chatted about, there's something that people can proactively do to enable a so what, to enable that conversation afterwards?
That's a really good question. And part of it, that was something I was thinking about is we don't necessarily follow up and continue the conversation. I can say with small businesses what we did. So, and we're going to go on, but I just have this one example. So, with small businesses, right, when I started in 2015, we had a small business council that was 20 small businesses. And it was similar to our creative councils where we brought this group of people to campus, inspiration, education, speakers, all that stuff. But after a while, we realized we can't keep using these same 20 people for everything when we have a global small business program that we want to talk to the press or to talk to a policymaker. And so we started to build what we called advocates, which were small businesses verified. They use the platform in our products. And we knew that they would talk about us meaning Facebook or Meta, in a positive way to share how uh, the company had been instrumental in their business growing. And so we started to create these advocacy groups on Facebook. And so the so what became after an event, and initially we did it by city and then it became by region, but it allowed people to go and follow up and talk about either what I learned or I implemented a lookalike audience and this was really successful for me. Or someone saying, I'm having problems with the such and so. And someone would say, bring your laptop, like, let's meet at so and so's cafe and I'll walk through it with you because I know how to do this. And that's where I think small business was great with the so what and basically handing people those groups to let them continue the conversation on their own. I don't know overall that we do that as well. Yes, there are recaps for salespeople. There's the so what that they can follow up and sort of have that, you know, warm lead or topic to talk about to lead into the conversation of sealing business or doing the deal. Um, but I'll have to think about that. I don't know that we think about the so what as intentionally as we should.
I
What do you
actually
think?
couldn't agree more. It's something that I don't think people talk about enough or think about. And usually we think that delivering a program is that's the end of it.
Yeah,
And to make a moment resonate, I think there's a lot more that needs to go into it. And the
yeah,
follow-up is certainly a key component of it. But leaning into a lot of the examples that you shared today, being very intentional with your 4 Ps and leaning into them before, during, and after are super
mhm,
important. And being able to facilitate those opportunities for people to come together and lean into the proximity, lean into those unplanned moments that can only happen when people are together in person on site, that
mhm,
you create the environment that is ready for that uh, happiness of the unexpected, those
yeah.
fortuitous moments. So if you can create the environment, doesn't guarantee that those moments are going to happen, but at
It
least
doesn't,
the
and you can
opportunity
create a
is there.
perfect environment, and you don't get it. Like I said, that's where the magic is. You don't always know, you can't predict it.
But this is great. That wraps up my questions for this very first episode of the Experience Project. So I sincerely
Congrats.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be guest 0 to do the test
The
and see how
pilot.
you're gonna out to make it happen.
You are the
Yes.
pilot. So this is wonderful. I really appreciate it.
In memory of our friend Keith Baker. And so I want to
Yes.
say that because I know that you 2 talked about this a lot. And so when you told me that, I was like, Chris, you've got to make this happen. It's such a great idea.
It is making this come to life is definitely something that is in his memory.